In this week's Pass the PE exam, I'm going to talk to Connor Adamsick, an EIT and bridge engineer at HDR in Denver, Colorado, who recently took the civil structural PE exam in April, about his experience taking the exam and how he thinks gymnastics correlates with studying for your PE exam. He's also going to provide some very specific study prep tips that you won't want to miss. Connor Adamsick is a former walk-on gymnast at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. He eventually became a scholarship athlete, was voted team captain, and on his last routine of his career earned All-American honors by placing fourth on floor exercise at the 2018 NCAA Gymnastics Championships. Now he works to use what he learned as a student athlete while in the early stages of his career as a bridge EIT. But before I speak with Connor, let me remind you that most successful engineers will tell you that getting their PE license was the biggest career growth driver that they've experienced. Whether that was due to a promotion, a salary increase, or just more exciting projects to work on, you want to get your PE license. However, preparing for the PE exam can be a real challenge. But through this and other videos on this channel, you will learn everything that you need to know about the licensing process, including PE exam preparation. So please be sure to subscribe to my channel here, as my weekly videos will help you pass the PE exam. And if you leave questions in the comments below, I will answer them in future videos. Let's jump in with Connor Adamsick. Connor, it's great to have you here with us today, and I know you recently took the PE exam, and I want to congratulate you for getting to that milestone, because that's an achievement in itself. And if you've watched any of the videos on our show, then you know that it's a process to go through it. So Connor, what I'd like you to do is, could you briefly kind of introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them what type of engineering you practice?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Anthony. So as you mentioned, my name's Connor Adamsick. I'm a proud University of Nebraska graduate, where I studied civil engineering and emphasized my design courses in structures. I now live just outside of Denver and work as a bridge EIT for HDR in their Denver office. And yeah, I kind of, through an internship opportunity in college and chances to travel the country with gymnastics, really fostered a real admiration for bridges. And I'm extremely fortunate to now kind of live that dream of being able to now work on the design of rail and roadway bridges across the country and even in Canada.
That's awesome. So Connor, you recently wrote an article on LinkedIn called All-American to PE Hopeful, where you talked about how while competing for your university, you were also studying for a degree in civil engineering. What has this experience kind of taught you, and how does gymnastics correlate with studying for your PE exam?
Yeah, so my experience as a student athlete prepared me for so many different aspects of my life. I started at Nebraska as a walk-on, worked extremely hard to earn my spot in the lineup, eventually earned a scholarship, was able to achieve my ultimate goal on my last routine in my career of becoming an All-American. And, ever since then, it really gave me the confidence to know that I can achieve anything if I set my mind to it. But then, kind of getting into the studying for the PE, once I began studying, it was like 15 to 20 hours a week on top of work and in normal life, the correlation really became pretty apparent. As a student athlete, it is how it sounds. You're a student first, and in order to succeed at both, you have to kind of become an expert in time management. And that really just helped me get on the right path, kind of off the bat, studying. And I created a schedule, and just from experience, I added some room for flexibility. I had work things come up, professional meetings for professional organizations continued. Well, I live in Colorado, so a good snowstorm, you got to try to get up to the mountains and hit the slopes a little bit. So that really helped just kind of foster my time management. And then one more major comparison, I think, is gymnastics is a pretty brutal sport. There's a lot of injuries, a lot of setbacks, things like that. And that really helped me prepare for when my studying kind of got hard, or when I did pretty poorly on my first practice exam. It helped me just get past those tough days and realize they were just minor setbacks, and had to just keep on going and only make the journey a little bit more rewarding at the end of it. So.
Yeah, that's great. When I hear you talking about all those, it really does, show a parallel between the two and how one could really help the other. And it's good to hear that, because I think that, I'm a big proponent of sports, play a lot of sports. I still coach a lot of sports. I think that there's a lot of spillover from athletics to education and your career for a lot of the reasons that you said. And it's good to hear you kind of match it up with the PE exam studying process, because it is a very rigorous process. So what I'd like to ask you to do, Connor, is kind of take us through the preparation process for you from the moment you decided to take the exam up to where you started to, study for the exam. Are there any, set guidelines, schedules, procedures you use to study for the exam?
Absolutely. So I took it a year early. So I went up to Wyoming to take it early. And I decided to do that, take the April 2021 exam about a year ago. And so kind of set up, looked at some ideas, and in about November of 2020, kind of began researching everything I needed to do to sign up for the test, get registered for all of that, and kind of what I needed to prepare for the exam. Just really start getting my mind right to begin studying in January, which is what I did. And starting in January, about 3 months to the exam, I looked at some study programs and ended up choosing PPI's kind of online self-guided study program. It gave me a lot of access to practice problems, quizzes, their version of the practice exam, which I mentioned earlier didn't go so well. And I got all my reference materials. Luckily, I had a coworker who just passed the exam in October, and he was able to hand me a bunch of the materials he used, including the civil reference manual, which is kind of like my book for this exam.
Sure.
It helped a ton. So any book, if you're going to only have one book, that's the book to get for sure. And then I also got the NCES practice exam, and I took that about a month prior to the exam, and really just kind of gave me that final push and know what I needed to focus on going into that last month. So.
Okay. So I'm going to go back for a minute and ask you a couple of follow-up questions on it. So first of all, go back to the decision to take the exam. You said you went to Wyoming so you could take it a year earlier. I guess they allow you to take it a little earlier than Colorado. Why was that important to you? Talk us through that decision.
Yeah. I didn't want it hanging over my head. And I feel like I have, large career aspirations for myself, and I want to get my PE as soon as I can to kind of continue pushing those career goals. And I get my 4 years of experience in June. And, I've heard some kind of horror stories that it might take a little long to get your registered and be able to apply for the exam. And especially with the April one being canceled last year, I know there's a lot more people signing up, trying to get in those. And I realized that, if that process takes a long time, then I might not be able to take the exam in Colorado until maybe even April 2023 instead of October 2022. And then, if I do, the first time not do so great, or I have trouble passing it, it's just, continuing to delay that getting my license. And so I looked up some states, and Wyoming is a border state with Colorado. And they allow you to take it, I believe, right out of college if you wanted to. But I think I have about 3 years of experience now, and I think that helped, and not losing that extra year of knowledge from college, I guess. And I think it's given me a little bit more confidence, a little bit more leeway, less pressure to pass it the first time. I have a couple opportunities now, even before I get my 4 years of experience, and, potential for, just life continuing on and life changes in the future, just wanted to try to get it out of the way.
No, it's great. I mean, I think everything you said there was great. I mean, listen, I'm a proponent. If you can get your PE license earlier, I'm a huge proponent of doing it for pretty much all the reasons you said. And I think another reason on top of all those things that I find to be important is I think you're sending a real signal to your employer, that you're serious about your career. You want to get out of the gate. You don't want to take any chances. I mean, listen, who knows what's going to happen with the exam? Who knows what's going to happen with anything? I mean, we've all seen a lot of stuff happen in the last year and a half that nobody ever expected happening. So I like the idea of kind of minimizing your risk in terms of how long it's going to take to get it. And again, you have to think about it from your employer's perspective too. When they look across the company and say, let's look for like who are these kind of movers and shakers in the company. Well, look at Connor. He went out there and got his license really early. He's in the right path. He's going in the right projection. So I think that there's a lot of value to it. If you're evaluating whether or not to get it earlier, I would recommend to do it as early as you feel you can accomplish it. I think it's an important milestone, of course, in your career. And then the other question I wanted to ask you about your process, Connor, is because people always ask us, how long does it take one to study for the exam? And I think it's a question that's different for everybody. Everybody studies different. Everyone has different process and approach. But I just want to understand, you said it sounded like you had a solid 3 intensive months of studying. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah. So I set aside about 15 to 20 hours a week for almost exactly, actually, to the date, 3 months before the exam. And I think for me, that was perfect. I think any longer, I would have continued to hit a wall prior. Was getting pretty tired and burned out towards the end of it. So I think the 3 months worked well for me. I was able to, spend a week on most subjects and kind of feel that I was doing okay. And I took 2 practice exams, and I kind of left the last month just kind of to review things, focus on maybe subjects I was struggling on. So yeah, I think it worked well for me, but yeah, like you said, everyone's going to be different. I think you just have to evaluate, look through all the subject matter, look through, what you know how to do today, look like, things like that, and just kind of really break it down and give yourself maybe enough time, a couple extra weeks for sure, just in case. And, if you need to take a break, then you're feeling confident, then you have that in there. So.
Yeah, that's great. And for those of you that are familiar with engineering projects, you want to lay out a good schedule, just like when you're studying and this is a project essentially. And if you can build some float or some leeway into that project where something happens, like Connor had said, something comes up, you have to miss a week, miss a couple days, you have that flexibility, which is important. And I think the other thing too, Connor hasn't received his results yet. I mean, I think we're both optimistic for him, of course, based on, his kind of rigorous study approach. But at the same time, I think part of the way you can judge how successful your preparation was isn't necessarily just pass or fail, but Connor said it right there, is he was able to get through everything on the exam. And I think that that's an important part of preparing for the PE exam, is making sure you cover all the sections that you need to cover. Otherwise, you may miss some real easy questions that if you just looked at it for a day or two, you would have got a couple of points there. So that's an important part of your preparation that I think you should think about. Now, Connor, the other thing I wanted to ask you, actually, before I ask this question, one thing I also want to mention on your other comment, for those of you that aren't clear what we were talking about when we said go to another state, get it a little bit earlier, some states require you to work, 3 or 4 years before you can take the PE exam at all. Some states don't have a requirement. They say you could take it, basically take the FE, then take the PE. You just then have to work the 4 years before you actually get the license. And we have another video on that as well, which you could check out on the channel here. But that's just what we were referring to when we were saying getting it a year early. I just wanted to clarify that in case some of you were kind of wondering what we meant by that. So, Connor, while you were studying for the exam, did you have kind of goals or milestones for yourself? And if so, how did they help you along the way, or how did you go about setting them, and how did they help you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm a huge believer in goal setting. And I kind of lay this out a little bit in that article you mentioned, I wrote, and I've always visioned my goals as a ladder. I know there's other analogies, but this one makes sense to me, where each rung of the ladder is a smaller goals that lead up to the top goal and bring you to the top of your ladder. And so I did that for goals in gymnastics, and I really laid that out too for my goals for passing the PE exam. So, for example, for PE exam, that was obviously the top goal, the top rung of my ladder. Smaller goals where you started kind of piling in, creating that study schedule, sticking to my study schedule. And one part that the PPI practice or study guide kind of had was like pass each discipline's quiz with a 70% pass rate. And so that was a each discipline was a rung on my ladder to pass with a 70%. And then, trying to pass the practice exam. The NCES one was really my goal, and pass that with a 70%. But they always didn't go to plan. I didn't always get a 70 on my first try on a quiz, or my first practice exam I did pretty poorly on. But they made me realize what I was struggling on. They were setbacks. I climbed back down, but then I was able to focus more, get more in depth, and then reclimb that next step. And when I finally got to the exam day, I was able to look back and see the ladder that I climbed figuratively, and realize that, I did eventually reach each rung, and what that I thought would bring me to passing my PE. And so it gave me the confidence I needed to go in and feel ready for the exam on the day I took it. So.
That's great, and I like your analogy of the ladder. I think it's a good analogy, and another analogy I like to use sometimes for people is a goal. Your goals are kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel. Yep. I think when you can see something, and it's easier to kind of move towards it and stay on track, as opposed to when you can't. You're just kind of going and going, and you can lose motivation. And so it is really important to set goals and milestones. And like Connor said, maybe he didn't hit all his goals, but he was able to then refocus. The goal was still there, and then he was able to work back towards it. And again, also a great thing about goals is they kind of get you back on track if you get off track a little bit. And
absolutely.
I would imagine in a process like this, they're critically important. All right, so Connor, let's fast forward to exam day now. Tell us about exam day. Was it everything you expected, and how do you think you did?
Yeah, so it's funny. When I was a gymnast, the day of the meet, I was always extremely nervous. My parents would give me a hard time, but I would have trouble eating, just relaxing before meet. It was just like I was just a ball of nerves. And so naturally, going into my exam day, I kind of figured that's how I would feel. But luckily, I felt great. I felt confident. I was ready, and I was able to, realize the preparation I put in. And it wasn't like I was going and doing a full routine and have to, worry about falling. It was something that, I could do a little bit easier than that. So I felt confident. And it was funny, one of the things that they don't really tell you, because each exam room is different. It's like what type of desk you're going to have. And so that was like a weird fear for me going in, and I was going to have a really small desk and not being able to use all my books and reference materials. But that was dismissed when I walked in, and there was a very large, long table. I was able to organize all my books in my suitcase, get what I needed out on the table, and just felt a lot more relaxed, as kind of those main fears going in weren't there. That kind of felt nice going in as they were handing them out. And going through the morning exam, I finished about 25 minutes early after going through it a couple times, and was able to turn it in before they don't let you leave the room. So that was nice. Got a little bit of extra time to get out, walk outside, clear my head, and get ready for the afternoon. And the morning I felt really confident. My goal was to try to shoot for like an 80% in the morning, just really rock solid. And I think I did that. I feel confident about what I did. And that kind of helped me stay relaxed going into the afternoon. But then once they handed out the afternoon test and I started looking through it, I kind of froze. I think those nerves finally caught up a little bit. I couldn't really find a question that I felt really confident with to start off. I went through it like twice. I was flipping through reading. I finally found one, realized it was easy, found a second one, and then just found my groove. And I think that really helped, like not just stressing over the first 10 problems, like finding question, 40 or 15 in the afternoon. I was able to do it, find another question, was able to complete it. And then it just relaxed me and gave me the confidence to continue through and just work through each one. And I think I did well. I feel confident about it, which some of my coworkers were like, that's awesome. I've never met anyone that's felt confident walking out. So I'm hoping it's a pass, obviously, and
sure.
Hopefully get my results by late June and go from there. So
that's great. And I think one of the things that I can see athletics, being involved in competitive athletics, how I could see that helping here is, with the PE exam, there's tons of preparation that it takes leading up to it, but it's really difficult to mimic the pressure of the actual exam, which I think you could say the same for an athletic event like a meet, where, you can do the routine 100 times, and then you get on the floor in the actual event and you're like, oh my gosh, it's here. Am I going to be able to do this? And some people lock up, and some athletes just can't perform at that level like others can. So I think that's a really good analogy for the exam. And what I often tell people, and we have several videos on the channel here about this, is the best way that I found to help with that is to put yourself in exam-like conditions as often as possible leading up to the exam. And Connor referenced that a little bit in terms of doing the sample exams, trying to get a certain score. I'm assuming, Connor, you put yourself in the situation with the timing yourself and being in a room with the book, with only the book you're going to use or the books you're going to use. All that, I would imagine, was helpful for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did 2 formal practice exams. One was a computer-based one, so it wasn't, a perfect mimic of it, but taking the NCES one, all paper, only the books I was going to have on the exam day, locked myself in our office in our house, and stuck to the 4 hours and 4 hours with the hour break, and didn't see my wife. Like, she left the house for the day for me, and just was able to let me focus and really prepare. But yeah, it doesn't prepare. It's not exact. It's never going to be the same. Yeah, similar, like you said, with athletics. You could try to mimic it as much as you can, but you go in there and you see the fans and you see the pressure, you see a score you need to hit or something like that. And yeah, it just adds to it. So seeing other people there, trying not to focus on, maybe their emotions leaving the room or coming back into the afternoon, just trying to focus on yourself and really just stay in the zone to do what you practiced and do the, take the exam as well as you prepared for it. So.
Yeah, I think everything we're talking about right now is also one of the reasons that if you are able to pass this exam, it does give you a tremendous boost of confidence in your career. Absolutely. And it's going through an experience like this is always a positive thing, because you need to learn how to approach something. You need to learn how to get organized, do planning, do execution. Like I said, really, it's like an engineering project essentially, and it's an important one. So, Connor, you've given us a lot of good information here. Before I let you go, is there any additional advice that you'd like to share with our subscribers out there that are considering or preparing to take the PE exam?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think if you're thinking about it, it's a great idea. Obviously, so many avenues that will open up in your career. But I think that the biggest advice is creating a plan, sticking to it. Leave room for flexibility. Things are always going to come up, and if you have too rigid of a schedule, you're just gonna get blocked and try to work your way around it. Maybe add some stress. And then also, one thing for me is I tried, maybe a subject that I wasn't so great at, like geotechnical subject and material. I just struggled with it, but I realized, in the big scheme of things, it was only going to be a couple of questions in the morning on that. It was only like 3 or 4 questions, I think, and that really took some pressure away. It was just a small amount of information on the exam, gave me a little bit of time to slow down my mind, a little bit more flexibility to just relax and learn, like really dive deep and not stress so much about it, because it wasn't the whole exam. So.
Awesome. Well, listen, Connor, thanks again for spending some time with us here on Pass the PE exam. What we'll do is we'll keep in touch with Connor, and once he gets his results in a month or so, Connor, we can have you come back on and maybe we can kind of debrief the exam a little bit. Sure. And if you would like to, check that out, subscribe to the channel here. And we want to kind of, we like talking to people at every stage of the process so that we can help you pass the PE exam. Thanks a lot, Connor.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I hope you found my conversation with Connor helpful. In upcoming videos, I will solve some more PE exam practice problems and answer other questions from our subscribers. Pass the PE exam videos will publish weekly, so please be sure to click the subscribe button so you don't miss something that could make a substantial difference in your exam result. And please, ask questions and leave comments below this video, and I will respond to you and let me know if there's a specific topic that you'd like me to cover, or maybe there's a question that you need answered. Pass the PE exam will have you covered. I'll see you next week on Pass the PE exam.